Now let's turn to the homeland. Those who leave come back determined to kill for a cause they often know very little about. We're once again joined in studio by the professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. Robert Rubio joins us. And also, welcome back to MidPoint, national security analyst for the Clarion Project and adjunct professor of Homeland Security, Ryan Mauro. Ryan, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Ryan, I'm going to start with you on this one because here's a story and a report that comes out from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. It says that a bulletin, law enforcement, continuing trend of Western youth being inspired by the Islamic State to travel to Syria to participate in the conflict. How do you stop this? I mean, honestly, and let's get right down to the root here because we know this isn't anything new, but somebody's got to come up with a way to get to the root of the cause here and find out how to stop them.
Really, when it comes down to it, it comes down to the Islamist ideology, those that believe in Islam but take it and turn it into a code of governance.
But how do you then get past that, though? Because I hate to interrupt you, but you're right, but we've heard this all before. How do we then get involved in that and drive a wedge in that?
Sure. Well, first of all, you have to take those that believe in that and you sideline them. You don't embrace them like the Muslim Brotherhood. Secondly, you pick out allies like clerics that are preaching against that. Right now, the allies that we've been focusing on, we're basically saying, well, you qualify as long as you condemn ISIS. Do you condemn terrorism? Do you condemn Al-Qaeda? And that's a very low bar for entry. And it needs to be more specific, and we need to have a higher bar. And a good example of this process in place is what happened in Virginia, where there was a teenager who was arrested because he was an ISIS recruiter. Before that, what the Clarion Project found out is that he appears to have been affiliated with another organization that believed in the caliphate, was anti-American. So this is the result of themes and narratives that need to be countered, and we can't just focus on one group and then the next group and then the next.
All right, do you agree with that?
As a matter of fact, I agree to a large degree, yes. Yes, as a matter of fact, and I will add more, I would go and I will be very diligent in monitoring all those missionary Islamist movements like Hizb ut-Tahrir or Jama'at al-Tabligh, that they project themselves as non-violent, but mainly their ideology is about creating an Islamic caliphate or bringing back the Islamic caliphate. And this is where I mentioned, I believe this on your show, is that they go and somehow they inculcate in the youth mainly that their loyalty should be to the Muslim Ummah and not to the land. And this is where it starts. And then you have the recruiters. And the recruiters are ideologue. They are Islamists. And from Islamists, you have different branches. You have the Salafi, you have the Wahhabi, you have the Muslim Brothers, you have the Deobandi. You have many of them. And this is where they try to brainwash them.
I got to stop you, but this is what happens here, because also in your book that I'm still reading, because it's a fascinating read to go through it.
Thank you.
Every time we get together, we mention 2 more, 3 more, 4 more different groups that we need to be looking at. Are you confident that as an American security force, Homeland Security, that we're watching them, that we have the ability to look at all these people?
Well, I hope so. This is something I hope so, and why I say I hope so in a confident way, because the FBI has already foiled many attempts in New York, in many places, many attempts. Some of them we don't hear about, some of them we hear about. So overall, I would say that our security agency, especially the FBI, they have been doing a good job.
Ryan, let me throw it to you. Do you think we're doing not just a good enough job, but to know the scope of what goes on here? Because every time we dig into this, there's another piece, there's another tentacle, and it seems as if we are then looking at another 10, 20, 30, 400 people that we have to start looking at.
Well, I think that we're doing a good job considering the very frightening math that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security has to go up against. But we need an active citizenry. We need people that are unafraid to report expressions of sympathy for jihadists. And until you start defining the threat in those terms, people aren't going to be able to report it. So here's an example. Very often when I'm gathering intelligence and I give it to the different agencies and I talk to someone that saw it on Facebook and say, how come you didn't report it? There's a very common misconception among Americans that if something is publicly posted on Facebook, that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security already knows about it, and so it's taken care of, and so you don't have a responsibility to report it.
Well, wait a minute. Shouldn't they know about it, though? Because here we're talking about investigative. We're talking about the ability to follow social media, and we've nailed this before. Shouldn't our security agencies be able to dig into this? Shouldn't they have a better handle on it?
Based on my conversations with them, they say that they have handcuffs on them that are much more strict than most people realize. If they have evidence of specific illegal activity, yes, then they can go and they can monitor that Facebook. But are they allowed to just scroll through them and go through everyone as part of a radical Facebook group that's anti-American? No, they're not allowed to do that. And so they rely on civilians to report that type of thing. Again, this teenager that was arrested in Virginia that we just reported on at ClarionProject.org, he was connected to a clothing line that had shirts that were pro-jihad with AK-47s on them. I don't know if he wore that to school, but if he did, I sure hope someone said something.
Aren't we, though, getting to the point here, and let me bring you in on this, Professor,
Please.
to the point where somebody just wears a T-shirt, and all of a sudden we seem to be panicking at this point, but the reality of the situation is we don't know how deep it goes and where the brainwashing begins.
Well, as a matter of fact, if someone like him, and as the gentleman mentioned, he is wearing a T-shirt with the AK-47 and a Salafi, you know, something like that, symbol of Salafism, he should be reported. And here I believe students and especially the teachers should go ahead and report them.
Well, wait a minute, that's the next thing, too, because we still need to be proactive then from the teacher's perspective, the educator's perspective,
Yes.
the parent's perspective.
Yes.
We're digging right back into the social fabric of this country that has to be involved 24/7.
Yes, yes, I would say, of course, yes. And but also you have here to walk a fine line. And he mentioned something why some people say don't go report, because indeed you have a fine line, and you don't know if you are sometimes doing the right thing or not the right thing. So here it is about education, and this is why I believe the government probably should do more to educate the citizen how to go ahead and report such instances, because sometimes your reporting could be false and you could put some people into trouble, and sometimes the case is you don't report, and this is when you cause problem indirectly, of course.
Ryan, I'll get it to you on this as well. Last 30 seconds as we discuss this, because the professor here has talked about getting to people and giving them that reason to then come and talk about it. What do we do then to get them to talk about it? Because most people are scared.
Well, if you go to the Department of Homeland Security website, what's their slogan for citizen involvement? It's, if you see something, say something. See what? Say what? Tell who? There's no specifics whatsoever. And also, we have to recognize that if someone wears a jihadist t-shirt, they can't be prosecuted for that, and that's perfectly fine. But authorities can take that into account as part of their intelligence gathering and say, you know what? That's probably a clue.
Okay, that's what we have to do and stop it there. Ryan Mauro, always a pleasure to have you on the show and give us your perspective. Again, the professor's book, Salafism in Lebanon, From Apoliticism to Transnational Jihadism. You will learn an awful lot. Great to see you again,
It's my
friend.
pleasure.
Be good.
It's my
We'll do it
pleasure,
again
Ed.
real soon.
Thank you.
Next up, the issues surrounding every American, healthcare. Next.